Hello everyone, Akinoff here, and welcome to another Let's Talk. Today I want to talk about this, which is going to be up on the screen right now. If it's not, I've put something weird up instead, like a kitten with tentacles. I don't know why I'd have that, but it might. Anyway, this is the map of Xenoblade Chronicles Cross, and you can see that I've got a few things written here. What I want to talk about is the actual logic that seems to be behind the actual areas and their layout and everything about that. Because there's two areas that are quite lush and green over on the east and south east, which connects to a desert area, which is barren with there is some vegetation around the water areas, but it's fairly barren. Then you have the northern two areas, which are, for the most part, completely barren. Except they're in the white area, which is basically covered in polleny stuff, but it's like, how would I describe it? It's more like it's covered in dust than anything. There's very little that actually resembles proper life. It's a very harsh and hostile environment. It's probably even more harsh and hostile than the lava place, to be honest, in terms of an environment. And there is a very good reason for this. Okay, so what we know from Xenoblade Chronicles is the Telethia. As you can see, it's written there, Telethia, the Endbringer. And that is, Telethia the Endbringer is basically a super boss in this game. It's level 99, the highest level enemy in the game. You can get to level 60, so you're not matching it in level anytime soon. It flies around up in that area that I've got circled. It's got a giant plant there. There's lots of lush life all throughout this entire area that's like slightly I wouldn't know if I'd say it's darker green than the bottom green area, because like there's a cutoff. You can where my two arrows split on this diagram. There's a bridge that leads onto a part that's still part of the lush, like rainforesty, jungly type area, and that goes down to about where the curve kind of stops curving on the bottom arrow. If you can actually figure that out. There's like, and it cuts it off there when it changes to the, just plain, the more plainsy sort of area that's there. If you know the game, where Noctilum cuts off the Primordia. It took, I haven't played this in quite a while, a few months I think, and no, it's much less than a few months actually, like maybe a month. Actually maybe a month or two, yeah. I'd forgotten Oblivia's name. I was like, Noctilum, Coldrus, Silverlim, Primordia. What's the other one? I was thinking of all this random junk, and I'm like, that's definitely not it. Took me about half an hour to figure that out without looking it up. Anyway, what we've learned. I should get back to the topic. Telethia, the Endringer, yeah, that's there. I'm not going to say what I was going to say because that's inaccurate, or at least I think it is, and I'll save that for another time. Anyway, Telethia are in Xenoblade Chronicles. They're known as basically the Bionis' cleanup crew, and their purpose is to gather ether and redistribute it and give it back to the Bionis. What do they do? What would a Telethia do if it had no Bionis to give it back to? The logical thing would be to return it to the planet. So, we have a single Telethia. And before people say Telethia Plume and Telethia the Endbringer are separate things, and they also notice my bad paint editing of this picture, no, they are exactly the same. It's just an excuse to have a nemesis. Anyway, when you consider that ether is essentially the source of life on a planet, well, in the Xeno universe, as far back as Xenogears, ether is basically life energy, and, well, there's a lot of ether in Xenosaga, just as a thing. And I'll get more into the relationship with Xenosaga and this game at a later point. Anyway, what I want to say about this is that the Telethia essentially goes out and gathers ether, and it hunts, gathers ether, and it returns it to this spot up the top here. But that ether gets deposited into the water there, and it flows down and spreads throughout. And of course, it first flows through Noctilum, and then around him through Primordia, lastly reaching Oblivia, Silverlim, and Coldris, with Coldris being the last place it would get to. Now, you might expect some more lushness and vegetation in Silverlim or Oblivia. I personally think there's actually very sound reasons for there not being in both cases, but let's focus on Silverlim for now. Silverlim is home to, God help me pronounce that word, Yggdrasil. Yeah. Anyway, that's Faris the Everqueen. Faris is one of those. Essentially, I would describe them as spacefaring plant dragons. And they're sort of like planet parasites. Their description is that they absorb ether from a world to make a jump, so they can make their next jump to another world. And generally speaking, they kill worlds. Yeah, this is a world-killing dragon. And it's only level 97. So Telethia is stronger. Now, some of the interesting things about this is the area all around it is drained of like easily habitable land. Like, what exists there is probably remnants of, I'll be honest, a very large creature. We've mentioned in this because, of course, I am one of those people that thinks that Xenoblade Chronicles Cross takes place directly, if not maybe a few years after Xenoblade Chronicles. And now you may be like, that makes no sense. Xenoblade Chronicles was on two Titans, and even if you know how it ends, you may still think, but they went to Earth. But no, that doesn't make any sense, because there's a few things. Firstly, I shouldn't actually get into that. I should talk about that some other time. Anyway, I just want to talk about how these continents make sense. You see, because the Ylgarith or Faris can't leave, well, since it drains ether, the area around it is very barren. However, since Telethia is constantly gathering ether and depositing it, ether is spreading throughout the world. And of course, this brings me to the thing that I think is probably the most interesting question I have about this game. Is the most important part of the story not the whole thing to do with New LA and the Ganglion, but instead a conflict that may exist between Telethia, the Endbringer, and Faris the Everqueen. So we have two creatures, both of which that absorb ether. However, one of them returns ether to its master, or, in this case, the planet Mira. However, the other one uses it to escape a planet and travel to another one. There's one big problem with this. nothing can escape Mira. And there's a reason behind that, but we'll get into that at another point. Anyway, so this is what I wanted to talk about. We have Xenoblade Chronicles Cross, set in a world where 2 of 5 areas are lush. Another one has life but struggles. Another one is full of lava but actually has a surprising amount of life. And the third one's a desert with, once again, surprisingly large amounts of life. Now that I think about it, there's a lot of life in these places because, and the problem with, and what probably makes this most ridiculous is because they needed to fill it with enemies, so they couldn't have just like massive amounts of just completely empty space. They could have a fair bit, but you know, you need enemies scattered throughout these areas, and it wouldn't just work to only have mechanical enemies in some areas, because you know. Anyway, the point is that I'm trying to get across is that this world actually makes sense in terms of ether and how it's described in the game. It is life force, it is energy, it creates life. So, since the high concentration of ether spreads out the way it seems like it should, maybe a few more arrows would actually describe it. Maybe it looking like a weather thing report would give it a bit more clarity, but this is probably the best explanation. You may get a better one, but probably the best explanation I can give you for why the continents are laid out this way and why the ones that are lush and green are the way they are and the ones that are less so are the way they are. Although you could argue that it's about, hey, these ones have water, and where there's water there's lushness, except if you look at the beach access on either Coldris or Silverland, there's not lushness there. Neither is there lushness near the beaches on, what's it called, Oblivia. Except there's one small island down in the bottom right corner. I didn't circle this, I should have. Because this island is actually very lush. And I just realized that that's rather strange. But I have ideas why that is, and I'll explain it in another video. Because I plan on doing a few videos on this, because if I just kept talking about this, I'd need a new picture. And more, and I'd need more time, and it would probably take me about. I'd probably spend a few days. I could probably talk about this for a few, like 10 odd hours if I really wanted to. One last thing I want to talk about: where you first encountered Telethia. Okay, spoilers for the game. But if you're watching this and you didn't want spoilers, you should have checked out ages ago. You first encounter Telethia, the Endbringer, in that tainted area that I've got circled. Okay, in this place, it's quite desolate for this area, and it's quite unpleasant and dark, and the creatures here are just wrong. So what does Telethia do? Telethia kills them, eats them, absorbs their ether, and flies on back home. So this implies that Telethia is busy keeping the planet safe and alive, while Yulgrif is trying to kill it to escape, which it can't do. So there's a constant battle going on here. And I would say that... Okay, this is gone. You may not believe me on this, but the round structure that Yulgrif's in, that Faris, the Everqueen's in, it has a lot of ether in it. It's got a flowing green liquid that's constantly pouring out of it, and that is probably the. You see, most of the top half of Silverland is actually completely desert. Well, mostly desert. But there's more lushness in the bottom half. My personal thinking is that this is a remnant of something from Xenoblade Chronicles. its actual structure and interior is quite reminiscent of a certain area, which is why I think it's a direct sequel, sort of, you know, without actually obviously showing any of the characters from Xenoblade Chronicles, even though I think that you do see two of them, and I'll get into that more another time. Anyway, this has been my explanation, or my ideas about how the map of Xenoblade Chronicles makes sense, and a bit about the conflict between Telethia, the Endbringer, and Faris, the Everqueen. My name's Vinaknov, I hope you've had a good time, and good night, or something like that anyway. I'll bring you another video on something like this again. See you then.